The simplest way to start using the new HTML5 semantic tags such as article, section and nav is to use one of the predefined layouts in the new document dialog box. By the way, in this and all future lessons I'll be using the Video to Brain workspace specially configured for this course. Feel free to use whichever workspace layout you're most comfortable with. To use one of the predefined layouts, select the File menu and New to open the new document dialog box. Make sure that blank page is selected and the page type is HTML. And right down at the bottom of the layout column, you've got two predefined HTML5 layouts. One of them is 2 columns with all the widths fixed in pixels with a right sidebar, header and footer. The other one is 3 columns with fixed widths with a header and footer and sidebars on both sides. I'm going to select the 2-column one. Now you notice that the doc type is set to HTML5 and layout CSS is set to add to head. You've got the option of creating a new file for the CSS or linking to an existing file. What I'm going to do for this demonstration is to put the CSS in the head because you can always move it later. So just click Create. And this is the predefined layout. If you click the Split View button and open the page, you can see that it uses header, nav, aside, all the HTML5 semantic tags. Let's just go back to Design View. Now you may not want to have the sidebar on the right-hand side, but it's very easy to move. Just click somewhere in the sidebar, then select Div Sidebar 1 in the tag selector at the bottom of the document window. And here in the CSS Styles panel, you can see that it says Float Right. Click in the value and select Left. And bingo! There we are. The sidebar has been moved to the left-hand side. Now you might be wondering why it's div sidebar and not a side sidebar. The point is that the HTML5 specification encourages the use of semantic tags in preference to div tags, but it doesn't ban them. It says that div elements can be used for stylistic purposes, or to wrap multiple paragraphs within a section that are all to be treated in a similar way. And what has happened here, if we look in split view, is that we have the div, and inside the div we've got a nav element and an aside element, so the div is holding the two together. Now let's take a look at the CSS in the head of the document. Notice here that header is a selector. It's a tag or type selector used in exactly the same way as you would do for P or for div with HTML4 elements. So the new semantic tags can be used in CSS as selectors in exactly the same way as with HTML4. The CSS in the predefined layouts is very heavily commented. The idea of this is to explain to you how to use the new semantic tags and how to use CSS with them. The idea is to help you understand the structure so you can customize it to your own tastes and needs. Now if we go down to the bottom of the style section, you'll see here on line 108, this style rule is for the new semantic elements and it sets them to display as block. Now in the latest browsers they do actually display as blocks. The idea for this is to support older browsers. And if you look immediately below that line, you'll see that immediately below that is an Internet Explorer conditional comment. This is for browsers older than Internet Explorer 9 because they don't recognize any of the new semantic tags. They need a little bit of JavaScript encouragement to be able to style the semantic tags. If you don't have this, what happens is that older versions of Internet Explorer fail to style any of the new semantic tags, and as a result, your page looks a complete mess. This conditional comment is so useful I suggest that you save it as a snippet. So with it selected, right-click and then choose Create New Snippet from the context menu. And in the Snippets panel, give it a name such as IE6 to 8 HTML5. It's a block, so select the Insert Block Radio button and then just click OK. And that's now stored in your Snippets panel. As you can see here, IE6 to 8 HTML5, and that can be used any time that you create a page that you want to display using the semantic tags. and it'll ensure that semantic tags are displayed properly and styled properly in older versions of Internet Explorer. Because it's an Internet Explorer conditional comment, it won't be seen by any other browser, so there's nothing to worry about there. Let's just close the snippets panel. Now, as you saw before, there's a rather large amount of comments in the CSS. It's very useful for learning purposes, but probably when you want to deploy a page, you want to get rid of it. Now, I've created a saved query which you can use in Dreamweaver's Find and Replace to get rid of these CSS comments in a single stroke. Go to Edit, Find and Replace. Alternatively, press Ctrl F on Windows or Command F on a Mac to open the Find and Replace dialog box. And then click the folder icon on the right-hand side. As you see, it's got a tooltip which says Load Query, and then navigate to the folder for this lesson. And select Scrub CSS Comments DWR. DWR is the file name extension which Dreamweaver gives to saved queries. Select that and click Open, and what it does is it loads into the Find and Replace dialog box what's called a regular expression. This is a text pattern that matches CSS comments and replaces them with nothing. Click Replace All, and it rushes through and removes all the comments. You can see the results of the Find and Replace search here in the Results panel. Right-click the bar and close the tab group, and you can see that all the comments have been removed from the CSS styles. One thing that you need to be careful of is it removes all CSS comments. So if there are any comments that you want to keep, don't use Replace All, but go through them one by one and replace only those that you want to get rid of. So there we have it, one of the HTML5 predefined layouts in Dreamweaver CS5.5. They certainly give you a head start, but they're very limited. Although they use the HTML5 semantic tags, there's no obvious way to add new ones of your own, except by working directly in the HTML code. There's also the danger that some visitors to your site will be using an old version of Internet Explorer with JavaScript disabled. For that admittedly small minority, your pages will look a mess. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add the new HTML5 semantic elements to a web page. This example page contains 2 headings, several paragraphs, and an image. The content is deliberately simple, but it's sufficient to illustrate some of the challenges of working with the new HTML5 tags in Dreamweaver CS5.5. The first thing you need to do before adding semantic tags is to create a style rule to display them as blocks. This is essential for older browsers. So I'm going to click the file name of the style sheet in the Related Files toolbar to open it in split view. You can see I've already created a few basic rules, but I need to create a rule for header, footer, nav, article, section, aside, and figure. They all need to be displayed as blocks, so select the display property and set it to block. Code hints come in very useful there. So that basic rule will ensure that the new semantic HTML tags are styled properly in older browsers. I want to wrap the page contents in an article tag. There's no menu command or option in the Insert panel for doing so, but Dreamweaver has a very useful wrap tag command in the Design View context menu. However, if I select all of the content in the page and then right-click, you'll see that wrap tag is not listed. The solution is to select Body in the tag selector at the bottom left of the document window, then right-click in Design View and wrap tag is listed. And in there I can then start typing article, and as soon as it's listed by code hints, press Enter Return twice, and everything is now wrapped in the article tags. If we switch to code view, you can see that there we are, there's an article tag at the beginning, and there's a closing article tag just before the closing body tag. Now let's try the same with the heading. Let's try to wrap it in a header tag. So I've selected it there, right-click, wrap tag, and start typing HEAD. That brings us to head. Header is the next one. Press enter a couple of times, and you see that what has happened is that it's put it inside the H1 tags rather than outside. That's not what I want. So I need to undo that. Edit, undo wrap tag. And the solution again is to select the whole tag in the tag selector and then select wrap tag. Header. And this time it's worked very nicely. So far so good, but what I'd like to do is to wrap the first 4 paragraphs in a section tag. So if I try to select them, take in the image as well, which is inside the first paragraph, and right click. Again, wrap tag is not listed. I'd also like to wrap the image in a figure element and add a fig caption element too. But when I select the image and right click, wrap tag isn't there. There's nothing for it but to work directly in the HTML code. Create a little bit of space in here and start typing section. It brings it up with code hints straight away, very quickly, and it's very easy to auto-complete. Scroll down to the bottom of that section, add in a new line, type an opening angle bracket and a slash, and it puts in the correct closing tag. So I put in another section here. And at the end. So that works very easily with code hinting and auto-completion. Scroll back up to the top here and do the same with the figure. Now I want to put a caption after the image, so I'm going to insert a fig caption element, a new HTML5 element. Fig caption, there it is with code hinting. And then type the caption. Then type an opening angle bracket and slash. I get the fig caption closing tag, do the same, and I get the closing figure tag. So that works very well with code hinting, but you've got to be very used to working directly inside HTML. Now that I've created my semantic elements, I need to add a few more style rules. So go back into the style sheet and create a rule for article. Set the width. Now a nice little hint here. The code hinting in Dreamweaver doesn't just begin at the beginning of the word. It looks for substrings within the word, and width has got the unique combination DT. It takes me straight to width. Just press enter and it auto-completes it. So I'm going to give it a width of 650 pixels and set margin to 0 auto. That will center it. And then a rule for fig caption. Going to display it as a block. Set the font weight to bold. And text align to center. And if we go into live view now and back, and what I've forgotten to do is to apply the float left or float right class to my figure element. So go out of live view, select the image and select figure in the tag selector here, right click it and set class to float right. There we are. Let's check it in live view. And the page is looking quite nice. The final touch is to add an Internet Explorer conditional comment to encourage older versions of Internet Explorer to style the new HTML5 tags. I've already saved it as a snippet, so let's exit live view, go into code view, and just before the head tag here, I'll insert a line and then go to my snippets panel, and here we've got it, IE6 to 8. HTML5, double click to insert it, and that will ensure that the page is rendered correctly in Internet Explorer 6 to 8, which doesn't recognize the HTML5 tags without that little bit of encouragement from JavaScript. So if you want or need to start using HTML5 semantic tags, working in Design View is not impossible, but it does have severe limitations. For the time being, Code View is consistently more reliable. The idea behind the new semantic elements in HTML5 is to give web pages a more meaningful structure and improve accessibility. It's fine in principle, but there are problems. The first problem is that there's no support in older versions of Internet Explorer. The semantic tags are supported only by Internet Explorer 9 and after. The workaround relies on JavaScript. The JavaScript solution forces Internet Explorer to create dummy elements that are never displayed, but which coax it into applying styles to HTML5 tags in your web pages. Problem is that if JavaScript is disabled, the new HTML5 elements remain unstyled in those older browsers. And the other problem is that assistive technology hasn't really caught up with HTML5. So what are the solutions? Well, one solution is to ignore the problem. Another one is to wrap the new tags in div elements. This approach is advocated by Tantek Celik, one of the most respected names in the web standards community. Let's see what it looks like in practice. This is a web page that uses the new HTML5 semantic tags such as article and header, section. Each one is wrapped in a div that has the same class name as the tag it surrounds. And if you look at the CSS, if you look at the style sheet, you'll see that you have to have two sets of rules, one for the HTML5 tags, setting the margin and padding to 0. That's in case browsers add default margins or padding to them, as has happened with Fig Caption and Figure. And then you also need the classes to display as block. I think that this all works very fine in principle, but maybe it's a little bit of overkill. So what other solutions might there be? Well, the first one is not to use the new HTML5 tags, and the alternative is to use Y-ARIA roles. Y-ARIA stands for Web Accessibility Initiative Accessible Rich Internet Application Specification. It's a bit of a mouthful, that's why people call it Y-ARIA. The way in which it works is that for each HTML semantic tag, you assign a Y-ARIA role. For example, for article, the Y-ARIA role is also called article, but HTML5 aside tags take the Y-ARIA role of note, complementary or search depending on what they're actually doing in the page. Footer becomes content info. Header is a banner, but that's only used if the header is for a banner type of heading. It's not for an ordinary heading. The H1, H2, H3 tags, they take care of that. There's no need to add an extra role. Nav is navigation, and section, there's a variety of roles that you can apply to that. Unfortunately, Dreamweaver doesn't support the role attribute in Code View or in the Tag Inspector panel. However, you can use Dreamweaver's Find and Replace dialog box. Go to the Edit menu and select Find and Replace. And what you need to do is to find in Folder. And go to the Hotel Begin folder for this lesson. Select that. Then change Search to Search for Specific Tag. The tag that you want to search for is div, so select that from this menu here. And set with attribute to ID. And then type header in the field alongside. Now, although Dreamweaver doesn't support the role attribute itself, you can type role in the set attribute field in the to. This is what you're going to set the value of role to. Set it to banner. You're not going to be using a regular expression, so make sure that that is deselected, and then click Replace All. Now, Dreamweaver will warn you that it can't undo this operation in documents that aren't open, but that's not a problem, just click Yes. And you'll see that what has happened here is the results panel shows you that it's added role equals banner to all 5 header divs in the selected folder. To make further changes, click this green arrow at the top left of the results panel to open the Find and Replace dialog box again. Rather than go through each change in this video, I've created a list of the settings I used. Because the Find and Replace dialog box can effect changes on a whole site, this is a relatively quick and painless way to make your site more accessible. You can find out more about why-aria and the role attribute at the following URLs. The decision about when to start adopting HTML5 semantic tags depends very much on the nature of your project and target audience. Old browsers take a long time to die out, so until assistive technology catches up with the new tags, my personal feeling is that using existing tags with the why-aria role attribute is probably the wiser strategy. Dreamweaver CS55 makes it very easy to convert existing pages to HTML5. Although you can only do one page at a time, it's not possible to convert an entire site in a single operation. I'm going to show you how to convert this page and then check that it contains valid HTML5. Let's open it in split view. As you can see, it contains an XHTML strict doc type. And the HTML tag contains this namespace attribute. In the meta tag, there are these attributes that describe the content. And at the end of the meta tag, there's a closing forward slash. There's a forward slash also in the link tag. To convert the page to HTML5, go to the File menu, Convert, and select HTML5. And that's it. That's all there is to do. Notice the really short HTML5 doc type. There's no longer a namespace in the HTML tag. Also, the closing forward slashes have gone from the meta tag and the link tag. The meta tag's also much shorter. It now just describes the character set. There's no need for the attributes to describe the content. It's an HTML5 document, and the doc type is sufficient to tell the browser what type of content it contains. You might be aware that the HTML5 specification allows you to use closing forward slashes in tags that don't have a closing tag, like this meta tag for instance. However, Dreamweaver CS55 doesn't support that syntax. If you've heard horror stories about HTML5 allowing sloppy code, there's nothing to worry about. Dreamweaver always wraps attribute values in quotes. And it always uses closing tags, even when they're optional, such as with paragraphs. As you can see, we've got closing tags here and the opening tags. So if you've come to like the stricter standards of XHTML, you'll find that Dreamweaver CS55 is just as scrupulous in its regard for web standards. But you'll have to say goodbye to those closing forward slashes. If you change your mind about converting a page to HTML5, you can easily reconvert it by going to the File menu, selecting Convert, and then choosing the doc type of your choice. Anyway, I'm going to leave this as HTML5. I'll just close the menu. You'll notice that this page uses M tags to create italics. HTML5 redefines the M and strong tags, reserving them for genuine emphasis, and recommends using I and B tags instead. So if you already haven't done so, open the Preferences panel from the Edit menu in Windows or from the Dreamweaver menu in Mac and go to the General category and make sure that this checkbox down here, which is marked Use Strong and M in place of B and I, is deselected. Then click OK. So I need to select this italicized word in Design View, make sure that I've got the HTML button selected in the Property Inspector, and click the I icon. That removes the M tags, and because I've made the change in the Preferences panel, if I click the I icon again, it inserts I tags instead. So I've got a couple of other places where I've got some italics. Let's change those too. It's a very easy change. It toggles between the different tags. So those are all the changes which I needed to make to convert this page to HTML5. I'll go to File, save the page, and now I'd like to make sure that it is genuine HTML5, that it's valid. So I'm going to go to the File menu again and select Validate, and then Validate Current Document W3C. The W3C is telling you that what Dreamweaver is going to do is send this page to the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium's validator. So you need to be connected to the internet to be able to use this. The reason that Adobe has decided to use the W3C validator rather than having one built in directly to Dreamweaver is because HTML5 is still evolving. So putting a validator directly inside Dreamweaver, it would possibly get out of date too quickly. So if I just click this, and it tells me that it's going to send it to the W3C for validation. If you don't want to show this dialog box again, just select this checkbox and then click OK. And here we are, we've got the result of W3C validation, no errors or warnings found, HTML5. And that's how simple it is to convert a page to HTML5 in Dreamweaver CS55. I've put together this rather impractical form to illustrate an aspect of HTML that's easy to forget if you use Dreamweaver's Insert panel to build forms. Let's just open Split View. Each form element is created using the input tag. What makes them look different is the type attribute. So for a text input element, its type equals text. The password element uses password, and the checkbox has a type equals checkbox, and so on. HTML5 has inherited all these input types from HTML4.0.1 and XHTML. New to HTML5 are all these new type attributes. Search is an ordinary text input field which is meant to look like a search field. It's left up to browsers how to present these new types, but they might, for instance, add rounded corners and a magnifying glass icon to the search type. The tel, URL and email types will be ordinary text input fields, but HTML5 compliant browsers check that user input conforms to the appropriate format. The number type accepts only numbers, and you can set minimum and maximum acceptable values. The range type will normally be presented as a slider. The color type is for selecting color values and might be presented as a color picker. And there's also a wide range of date-related types. Unfortunately, the Dreamweaver Insert panel doesn't have the option to insert any of these new HTML form types. As you can see, there are just the regular HTML4 input types. Let's just close that panel. To insert the new HTML5 types, you need to put in an ordinary text input field first, and then use the tag inspector or code view to change the type attribute. I've selected the search field here, and in the tag inspector I can see that the type is text. Just click here to open that menu and change it to search. For the phone field, I'm going to go into code view and use code hints. And if I press Control and the space bar, and it's the same in both Mac and Windows, it brings up a list of all the available types. So for the phone, we need to find tel. My preference is to use the tag inspector. I'll select website, and we'll change the type to URL. Email, again, very simple, just change it to email. Tickets required. Now that's going to be a number type. So I'll select number and then set the maximum and minimum. Let's set the maximum at 4 and the minimum at 1. Rating, I'll make that a range type so it'll become a slider. And color, I'll make a color type. Now let's just save that page and see what it looks like in a compliant browser. Here it is in Google Chrome. Now as you can see, most of the fields just look like ordinary text fields, but the number field has got a little stepper clicker here, so I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, click again and it won't go any further because the maximum has been set at 4. The range type has been turned into a slider. Unfortunately, there's no indication of the value being selected. You need to combine a range type with a new HTML5 element called output and use JavaScript to display the value. Let's see what happens if I try to put something that's obviously not a URL in the website field. This has got a type URL, so if I just type my own name in there and click submit, it tells me please enter a URL. So this is validation which is done automatically in the browser. I'm not using any JavaScript at all. I'll just get rid of that and then type the same in the email field. Again submit it, and it recognizes that it's not an email address. But what about old browsers that don't recognize these new HTML5 input types? Well, here's the same form in Internet Explorer 6. If I open Source View, you can see that it's using the new HTML5 input types, tell, search, email, but it's displayed them as ordinary text fields. So it's perfectly safe to adopt HTML5 form input fields without worrying about older browsers. Inputting dates in online forms is a minefield. Europeans write dates in the order date, month, year. Chinese and Japanese reverse the order, year, month, date, and Americans use the format month, date, year. Even if you can force users to input dates in a particular order, there's always a danger of choosing an invalid date, such as September the 31st. HTML5 seeks to solve this problem with 6 date and time related input types. However, it's a solution that not everyone will like, because it attempts to solve the international date confusion by specifying a unified format for the dates and times. They look like this. So to be valid in HTML5, the date input type must be in the format of year, month, date. Date time is year, month, date followed by a T, and then the time, which must be according to UTC, Universal Coordinated Time, or with a time zone. Date time local has the local time, so there's no time zone attached to that. Month is the year as 4 digits, followed by the month number. Week uses the format of the year in 4 digits, followed by a hyphen, W, and the week number. And time is expressed in the 24-hour clock. Dreamweaver doesn't have options for the new date and time input elements, so you need to insert a text input element first, and then convert the type attribute in the tag inspector or in code view. So here for date, I'm going to change the type from text in code view. Delete text, press Ctrl plus spacebar. It's the same in both Mac and Windows, and select date. For date and time, let's use the tag inspector. So type is now text, change it to date time. Then for local date and time, change it to date time local. The month, no surprises, it's month. Week is also week. And time is time. So the names are fairly logical. Right, let's save that page and see what it looks like in Chrome. As you can see, Chrome has added little up and down arrows to each field. If I click the up arrow for date, it gives me tomorrow's date and today's date. If I click date time, it gives me the time according to UTC. This Z at the end indicates UTC. It stands for Zulu time. Local date and time gives me the time where I'm actually working now, which, as you can see, is 2 hours ahead of UTC. This is the month in which I'm working, and the week, and the time. As you've just seen, Chrome follows the official formats for dates and times. These are ideal if the form input is going to be inserted into a database such as MySQL or SQLite that requires dates to be in the order of year, month, date. However, if you want to use local formatting convention, you need to use an ordinary text input element rather than one of the new date-related ones. The HTML5 specification adds several new attributes that can be added to form elements. Many of them are designed to eliminate the need for JavaScript validation when forms are submitted, because the browser will validate the user input automatically. They fall into 2 main categories: Boolean attributes and those that take a value. Boolean means a value that's either true or false. It comes from the name of the 19th century English mathematician George Boole, who's regarded as having laid the foundations of modern computer science. There are 3 Boolean attributes in the new form elements. Autofocus, that puts the focus automatically in one particular field. You should only use it in one field in a form, otherwise you cause chaos. The required attribute, that's quite obviously something that is required. The form won't be submitted if the user fails to enter anything into that particular field. Strictly speaking, the multiple element isn't new. It's available in HTML4 for multiple select lists, but now in HTML5 it can be used in any input element, such as file input or email fields, and that will enable you to upload multiple files or insert multiple email addresses in an email field. Attributes that take a value include autocomplete. The default value for autocomplete is on, so you only need to use it if you want to turn autocompletion off in a particular form or in a particular form field. You can either put it in the opening form tag, and then it applies to the whole form, or you can put it in individual fields. Min, max and step go in number fields for the minimum amount acceptable, the maximum amount acceptable, and the size of increment between each value. Placeholder adds a text hint inside an input field. The hint disappears as soon as the user clicks inside the field or tabs into it. And pattern, which is related with placeholder, takes as its value a text pattern in the form of a regular expression. In HTML5 compliant browsers, the pattern prevents the form from being submitted if the user input is in the wrong format. And finally we have list. The list attribute associates a data list element with a text input field, and it creates something which is similar to an editable select menu. Right, let's add some of those form attributes in Dreamweaver CS5.5. I'm going to make phone required, so I'll select it here and then go into code view, and if I insert a space, it then brings up the code hints. Type REQ. There we are, required, and press enter. For the email, I'm also going to make that required, but instead I'm going to use the tag inspector, and it's down here at the bottom in the uncategorized section. I just click in the field alongside required and then open the little menu and select yes. You can see that it's inserted required in the underlying HTML. Now for rating, this is a range type, so I'm going to add minimum and maximum values. I'll set the minimum value at 0, the maximum value at 25, and the step, which will be the increment between each value, at 5. So it should go from 5, 10, 15 and so on. The range type doesn't automatically display the value which is selected. So alongside the range input type, I've added a new output element and associated the two together by using the for attribute and using the ID of the input tag. And down at the bottom of the page, I've added a jQuery document ready handler with some script to display the range value in the output element. So let's save the page and see what it looks like in Google Chrome. Now I made the phone a required field, so if I try to submit the form without entering anything into the phone field, it'll tell me off and ask me to please fill out the field. So if I put a phone number in there, and submit, it now tells me off about not putting anything in the email field. For the rating, if I move the slider, you'll see that it now moves in increments of 5 up to a maximum of 25 and down to 0. That's the output element displaying it, but it does require JavaScript for this to work. When all these attributes are fully supported by browsers, JavaScript validation is likely to become a thing of the past. However, you'll still need to validate user input with server-side scripts to keep your site secure. Attackers can easily evade checks that are conducted in a browser. Two particularly useful HTML5 form attributes are placeholder and pattern. You can see the effect of the placeholder attribute in this form. Both fields have text that's displayed slightly greyed out to act as a hint to the user. As soon as you put the focus in one of the fields, the text disappears. It only reappears if you move to a different field without entering a value. In addition to using the placeholder attribute, I've added regular expressions to each field, using the pattern attribute to enforce the specified format. For zip code, it says here that I need to enter a 5-digit code. Well, my name has got 5 letters in it. Let's see what happens if I enter that and submit. No, it's been rejected by the pattern attribute. If I try it with 5 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's OK. Now let's try it with the date. I'll put in the date in my usual British way and attempt to submit. Now again, it's been rejected because it's not in the format that was requested by the placeholder, which is mm/dd/YYYY. So let's add those attributes to the form in Dreamweaver CS55. Select the zip code field. See that the type is text, but what I want to do is to add a placeholder to it, and I'll type in their 5-digit code. Now to enforce that format, I need to enter a regular expression in the pattern field. A regular expression is a pattern for matching text. It uses a combination of literal text and characters or pairs of characters with special meanings. For example, \d represents a single digit. Putting the number 5 in a pair of curly braces immediately after the \d means match exactly 5 digits. Now for the date, I'm going to add a placeholder which will be mm/dd/YYYY. Now, the regular expression to enforce this particular date format is quite complex, so I've already prepared it in this file called regex.txt. Regex is a short expression for regular expression. In this file, there are 3 different regular expressions to enforce mm/ddYYY, which is the American style, then the European style, which puts the date before the month, and then finally the style which is commonly used in East Asia, which puts the year before the month before the date. So I'm going to select the regex for the American date format and copy it to my clipboard by using Control-C on Windows or Command-C on a Mac. Then go back to my form, and in the pattern field in the tag inspector, I'll paste it using Control-V on Windows or Command-V on a Mac. There we are. It's rather a long expression, but if we just save it and then view the page again in Chrome, yes, it's enforcing it correctly. Unfortunately, regular expressions aren't easy to learn, but I've written a 2-part tutorial for the Dreamweaver Developer Center which offers a gentle introduction to the subject. The URLs are here. And you can also find a lot more information on regular expressions on these 2 websites. The first one is run by Jan Goiverts, the co-author of Regular Expressions Cookbook, which is an invaluable resource for any serious programmer. In this video, I want to show you a very useful new form element in HTML5 called DataList. The file that I've got open here contains an ordinary text input element. The type attribute is set to text, and the new list attribute is set to title list. This associates the input field with this DataList element. The value of list is the same as the ID of the data list. Inside the data list element are 3 option tags. You'll probably recognize the option tag from select menus. The only difference is that there's no closing tag or text in the option tags. So what does this do? Let's take a look in Opera, which tends to be the earliest adopter of new HTML5 features. As you can see, it looks just like an ordinary text input field, but as soon as I put the focus inside the field, it displays a list which comes from the data list. So I can choose Miss or Mr, or I can put in a completely different value. I'll make myself a doctor. So that's the way in which the data list works. Unfortunately, Opera is still the only browser that supports data list like this. So if you associate a data list with a text input field, other browsers ignore the preset options. That's okay, but to make your forms as usable as possible, it's often advisable to use a select menu for preset options and provide a separate text input field for situations where the presets don't apply. Thanks to some clever experimentation by Jeremy Keith, the well-known author and conference speaker, you can have your cake and eat it by wrapping a select menu in a data list. This is how it's done. In this page, I've got a select menu and a text input field. Let's look at it in live view. The select menu has a variety of options: Mr., Mrs., Miss, and then Other. So if somebody selects Other, you expect them to put the details in this text field. Before wrapping the select menu in a data list element, you need to make a few changes to the option elements. Any element that you don't want to show in the data list, you need to remove the value. So I'm going to remove the value from Choose and also the value from Other. We're now ready to wrap the select menu in a data list element. So put the cursor after the label, insert a new line, and Dreamweaver immediately brings up the code hint for data list. And I'm going to give it an ID of title list. And I'll put the closing data list tag after this label here. I don't want the second label to appear on screen if the browser supports data list, so I'm going to change this from a label into a span. And also change the closing tag to span. What I want to do is to associate this text input element with the data list, but at the moment its name is Other, so I need to change that to Title and change the ID also to Title. But two elements on the same page can't have the same ID, so I need to delete the ID from the select menu's opening tag. It doesn't matter that the select menu and the text input field have the same name. In fact, it's exactly what you want. Form processing scripts use the name attribute to identify the selected value or user input. If someone chooses a value from the select menu, it's sent with the form data as title, but if the text field is used instead, that value is sent as title. And finally, we need to associate the text input field with the data list. So insert the list attribute and set it to title list, and then save the page. There's just one thing I need to point out before we test the page in a browser, and that's in the style sheet. You need to set the display property of data list to inline block to fix a bug in some browsers. Now let's take a look at the page first in Opera to see how it works. Here we are, and it works exactly the same way as the original page. So your options are available there, which you can select, or you can type in your own value, and that's what will be submitted with the form. And let's see it in a browser that doesn't yet support data list. Here's the same page in Firefox 4, which doesn't yet support data list, but the select menu is available, and so is the text field. So that's a nice little bit of progressive enhancement thanks to HTML5's data list element and a technique developed by Jeremy Keith. The ability to insert native video in HTML5 without the need for Flash or other plugins such as QuickTime or Silverlight has become one of the most talked about, you could even say overhyped topics. In this lesson I don't plan to discuss which makes the better choice. That's up to individual developers. What I'm going to show you is how to insert native video in a web page using the Adobe Widget Browser, which is now integrated in Dreamweaver CS5.5. Let's start by looking at the end result.
Why was I sent to this place? I'm not a hero.
If it's your fate to be a great hero...
If I switch to split view, you can see that the video is in a video tag, and nested inside the video tags are 3 source tags, one for each of the different encodings that I've got for this particular video. The lack of agreement among browsers on which encoding to use is a major headache for developers, but the Adobe Widget Browser gets around this by providing a fallback solution, which renders the video using Flash if the browser doesn't support any of the encodings you make available on your site. Let's switch to a new page in which we're going to insert the video. First of all, you need to open the Adobe Widget Browser. There are 2 ways of doing so. The easiest way is to go to this icon in the application bar and click Widget Browser. Alternatively, you can go to the Insert menu and select Widget. This gives you a list of the widgets that you've already installed in your widget browser. But if you haven't installed one or you need to get a new one, then you just click this link here in the Widget dialog box. The Widget Browser is a separate program. If you've never opened it before, you'll be prompted to accept a license agreement. I've already used the Widget Browser, so it opens in a screen called My Widgets. But first-time users will see this display of the Adobe Exchange. And this shows you all the widgets that you can download from the Adobe Exchange free of charge to use within Dreamweaver. There's a wide range of widgets available, but the one that we're interested in is the HTML5 video player. Before you can download anything, you need to sign in with an Adobe ID. The sign-in is here at the top right, and it prompts you for your Adobe ID, which is normally your email address, and a password. If you've not created an account before, click this Create Account button. Create an account is free, and it takes only a minute. Well, I've already created an account, so let me just sign in. So now that I'm signed in, I can look at any of these widgets and see which ones I want to download. I'll leave you to do that at your own leisure, but let's download the HTML5 video player. After downloading, it's important to click this Add to My Widgets button in the bottom right. Accept the license, and then go to My Widgets. After downloading a widget, click the button to see what it contains. Most widgets let you configure them by clicking this Configure button down here. The HTML5 video player has very few settings. I'm going to leave them all at their default settings and concentrate on showing you how to insert the widget into a Dreamweaver page. So let's return to Dreamweaver. Now I want to insert my video between 2 paragraphs here, and let's just make sure where we are in split view. Yes, you can see that the insertion point is just before the closing P tag, so what I need to do is to select P in the tag selector down here and click my right arrow key to move outside of the closing P tag. So I'm now between the 2. This means that my video will be inserted between the 2 paragraphs rather than being nested inside the first paragraph. Now to insert the widget, go to the Insert menu and select Widget. It shows us that we've got the HTML5 video player widget installed, and we're going to use the default preset, and then just click OK. And what this does, it inserts all the necessary code to display a default video. First thing I need to do is to save the page. File, Save. Dreamweaver needs to copy a lot of files to your site in order to be able to support the widget. You just need to click OK, and this will put all of those files in the root of your site. We don't want to insert the default video, so we need to make some changes to the code. The width of the video that we're going to use is 420, and its height is 235, and its duration is 106. The widget browser has installed 3 source tags for different types of video encoding: WebM, MV4 and OGV. You need to replace the values in the src attributes with paths to the correct video file. So select the name, right-click, and then from the context menu select Code Hint Tools URL Browser. Then click that little browse icon and look for the correct files. They're in the video folder, and the first one I want is WebM. Click OK, and I have to do that the same for each of the others. Second one will be MP4. And the last one is the OGV type. The other thing which I need to change is the poster. The poster is a still image that is displayed before the video starts. There we are, we've got video poster JPG. And let's just save the page and test it in live view. You'll see that it waits a little while before initializing. Then you can click the arrow and it plays. So it's as simple as that to insert video into Dreamweaver CS5.5 using the Adobe Widget Browser and the HTML5 video widget.